if your dream's to be a musician and an artist like mine was, being savvy, whether it's at PU University or just reading a book, but actually doing the principles of having an emergency fund, putting money aside for like when the unexpected happens, will save your butt and keep you on the road way longer than the majority of your peers.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio, and Ayiesha Woods, Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and musician. Together, they talk with artists and industry insiders to discover our connection between music and faith. You can connect with us on Facebook or X at Between Grooves and on Instagram at Between Grooves Pod. Now, here's James and Ayiesha.
Welcome to Between the Grooves. We are back. James Curtis along with Ayiesha Woods. How you doing, Ayiesha?
Hey. I'm doing great, man. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm still on New Year mode, thinking about...
I hear you.
You don't want to hear this from me right now, but I've already started on my taxes.
Have you?
I have.
My God.
I do a lot of prep work in the January month, just adding up bills and monthly expenses and stuff for write-offs and whatnot. So I try to get a head start.
Yeah.
And that way, my thought is the sooner I can get the money back, the better, right? I get money back every year and I want my money.
You.
Yeah, it's all about money.
I hear you.
And this episode,
can I tell you?
This episode is all about money. Let's talk cash. Let's talk money, folks. Honestly, this is a topic that doesn't get touched on a whole lot, and I think it's really, really important, especially the fact that we're in the beginning of a year where people can make decisions and change lifestyles if need be, and do things for them, in essence.
Right,
not to sound selfish or anything, but do something for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. I'll tell you this, towards the end of 2023, the Lord gave me this scripture and I'm like, and it's in Proverbs, the 27th chapter, and it's the last few verses of it. And it says, know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds, for riches do not last forever. And does a crown endure to generations? When the grass is gone and the new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of the field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household and the maintenance for your girls. But the beginning part is what stood out to me most, where it says, know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. So just the responsibility that we have for maintaining good stewardship and us, getting a hold of these things at the top of the year, it'll serve us well,
Well, let's talk about money today. Our guest, Mike Crofts, has been in the music world, now spends more time in the money world, but certainly would love to pick his brain on what his thoughts are as far as what we need to be doing, what we need to be thinking about, and planning for the future. Mike Crofts on Between the Grooves.
Thanks for coming on and doing this, Mike.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
So, Mike, what are you doing in Alberta right now?
Freezing my butt. No.
Oh, my gosh, I hear you.
I thought you lived in Toronto.
I did. I used to. Then we moved to Alberta a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay. And are you happy there? Because there's been a lot of change in Alberta, too.
Yeah, well, we came out for the better weather. And, it's been good. It's a great place. We're in Calgary, so we're in southern Alberta where, we spend half the winter usually in a Chinook, which means it's usually golfing weather January, February. So I can't complain about that.
It's golfing weather in January, February in Alberta?
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
Oh
so Chinook is just a warm body of air that the mountains shoot over us. And so it's not uncommon to go from -10 to +10, +15 in a day. And sometimes it'll stay there for weeks.
Oh, okay. Because I know.
We had one in December. All of December we were +5, +10.
Right. I know I've experienced that in British Columbia where my parents used to live there, and I would go there, I would probably say in February, and it was already spring-like weather. Like you dress as if you were in Toronto with the, Toronto weather, the temperatures, the snow and everything else, and you'd fly to British Columbia expecting the same, and it's like, oh, I don't need this jacket,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was wearing shorts and a sweater all last month. So.
Well, there's a lot of people.
Oh my goodness!
There's a lot of people wearing shorts and sandals all year long in Toronto too. In fairness, so.
Oh gosh, that's something different.
So we got that Florida weather. Almost.
Almost. There you go. You used to be in a band called Sky Terminal. You used to play guitar. You didn't sing, did you?
I mean, backup, but
okay.
Nothing crazy.
And do you still play?
A little bit. Yeah. Obviously, with COVID, that shut that down quite a bit. What I started doing is me and a couple of buddies got together and we started writing songs for TV, and so we actually had a couple songs appear on a couple of different TV shows and stuff like that. So that's what we're doing. And that's what we've been doing. So
I know that there's money to be had doing that, and a lot of artists don't recognize that as being a revenue stream, and yet there's some good income if you can get with the right people and get on the right shows and create the right music for the shows.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more people are catching on now, but so it is getting busier. But there's definitely good royalties and streaming income. If you can get on the right shows and stuff like that, for sure.
Yeah. On the other side of the world, as far as your life is concerned, well, here we are. It's the new year, and what can I say? Credit card bills are here as well.
They
Some's
are
due today.
Yeah,
as a matter of fact.
The credit hangover.
Yeah,
as I call it.
This is when you find out how much money you actually spent and that you couldn't afford to. I will say that in my experience, from what I've seen and people that I've chatted with, a lot of artists and creatives are often not very business minded, and that can cause problems. I mean, when you were on the road, what was it like for you? What did you learn?
Well, that's a great question. So when I first got on the road, I was touring with an artist by the name of Manifest. I don't know if you guys
Chris,
remember him, Chris Greenwood. And that's where I started to learn business. We had all these hours in between shows of driving and flying that, it was like, I got to do something other than just sit here. And that's where we started to learn about money and business and study all that stuff. And so that's where being with him for a good amount of time, that's where I started to figure out the business side of things. And then when I went with Sky Terminal, the great part was, Marcel was a great songwriter, and I did songwriting as well. But I had the business background. So, we're an independent band. We're not on a label. We would go on tour and we would actually come home and make money, and it was like a cool thing because most bands can't say that. And so it was a great, while we were touring, it was a good income to supplement, when we were away from home. But it was really the business side of things that got us there because we knew how to, go after sponsorships. We knew how to get the songs in the places that were going to make us some money. We knew how to do that because of the experience I brought when, from all those years of learning with Chris and being on the road with him.
The fact of the matter is, when you're in a band, you're usually, unless you're signed with a label, you're usually an entrepreneur, you're usually self-employed, and that has some ramifications as well. Because if I'm working for a company, I collect a paycheck, they take the tax off for me, and if, when you're doing your budgeting and stuff, maybe you're tithing, but you've still got your rent or mortgage payments, you've got your heat that you have to worry about, you've got your electricity, food, fuel for your vehicle, you've got your phone bill and everything else. And at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot left when you are employed by a company, let alone if you're self-employed. You got to set some of that money aside. Otherwise you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, taxes take out a lot of businesses, right? Like when the CRA comes and says, not only do you owe us business taxes, but you owe us this thing called GST if you live where I am, or HST if you live in Ontario, that you're supposed to be collecting on behalf of the government. And most people either don't, or they don't collect the right amount, or they collect it and spend it. And that's where we find a lot of businesses and artists, to be honest, because artists are businesses.
Sure.
Get stuck, the finances start to fall apart there because they didn't do it the right way, or they didn't put it aside and just let it sit. And so luckily we understood all that, and we were able to keep that stuff where it was, and it didn't, cause us any hardship in terms of going into debt, or in terms of, owning the CRA, a whole bunch of coin. And so that's part of that savviness of if you want to make it in music, you do have to either have a partner that's really good in business and understand that can do that for you, or you have to get to learn it and understand it, so that 5 years down the road, you aren't like having to shut it down and go get a, quote unquote, day
9 to 5.
9 to 5 because you didn't handle the stuff properly. And that's how most businesses fail, by the way, is through taxes, not putting enough aside, or not saving what they should have. That's usually how most businesses start to fall apart.
That's right. Now, just to take a step back for a second, defining CRA, because we have a lot of listeners in the U.S. as well. So CRA is the Canada Revenue Agency. What would be the same thing in the States?
The IRS.
IRS. There you go. That's a scary
as
word.
Certain as death and taxes. That's it. Mike, how do you use your knowledge? Are you able to use it, and how are you able to use the knowledge that you have from a business standpoint? Are you able to use it and help other artists or people in the industry on their journey?
Yeah, we've definitely worked with some artists. Obviously, the business stuff applies not just to artists, it applies into the business world as well. So we've worked with a lot of businesses and a lot of artists, not only on how to be savvy and put the money where it should go and all that stuff, but also how to save taxes, believe it or not. In Canada, it's different in Canada than the U.S. It works in the U.S. too, but it works better in Canada, where if you can set up the business in a way, there's certain ways you can set up businesses. And if you set up in a certain way here, you can really reduce the amount of taxes you pay. And potentially bring it down quite a bit. And I figured that out the year that I paid so much taxes, all my savings got wiped out. This is many, many, many years ago, and that started me on a journey on how to keep more of my money instead of giving it all to the government. And so we help a lot of businesses do that, be able to keep more of their money and set them up in a way where pay themselves in a way where they aren't triggering a whole bunch of taxes. And so that's definitely something I've learned along the way that's helped me immensely. And then obviously we're teaching that to businesses and artists as well. Yeah.
Now, Mike, I don't want to put a target on my own back, but I have a philosophy. I have this mentality that I try to pay as little tax as possible.
That's a good thing, by the way. That shouldn't be a target. As long as CRA isn't listening, we're good.
Oh, okay, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about this is the thing that disturbs me sometimes when I see artists and musicians, and I suppose maybe this is became very apparent during the pandemic because there's a lot of people unemployed. There's a lot of people that aren't able to work because they can't do shows. They're very limited in what they can do, and that's not just the entertainment world and whatever. But I think about I went to that whole Dave Ramsey university thing. It's like the Dave Ramsey Bible. Yes. And one of the things that he talks about is this rainy day fund. And honestly, I don't want to sound callous, Mike, but I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who haven't planned ahead and they should have, and they know they should have, and they could have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When the times are good, like right now, artists are back in the game, and you got to have an emergency fund. I can't tell you how many times that emergency fund saved my butt on the road. The band would break down. the infamous van breaking down, right? I mean, how many of us, if you travel long enough, the van's going to break down.
Yeah, but you just have a GoFundMe and have all your fans. Oh, sorry. Did I say that out loud?
3 months later, you get the money. Sure, you can wait for that. Well, but it doesn't always come through the way you need it to. So any business practice, in business, we call it retained earnings. It's not necessarily called an emergency fund. You can call it what you want: emergency fund, retained earnings, opportunity fund. Some people call it. The opportunity is not going to debt when life happens. But it's very smart for any business, any artist, if you're starting out. And maybe if you're an artist that isn't full time yet, go build a 3 to 6 month retained earnings fund. 3 to 6 months of what you think expenses are going to be. And that way, when you're on the road, because let's be honest, there's one guarantee on the road: things are not going to go the way you have planned for them to go.
Right.
And when life shows up and that van breaks down, or the airline cancels your tickets or loses your luggage or whatever, you've got some money you can tap into that can hold you over till things get fixed and things get right again. And I've watched so many artists, revolving door on the road, so many artists leave their dreams to go back to the 9 to 5 because they didn't have a plan for when the unexpected happened. And they had to go back home and leave the road. It's so funny. Every tour I would go on, we would tour some of the same artists, at festivals and hit the road with them. And, a year later, it was like a revolving door. It was a whole bunch of new artists or a whole bunch of new players in the bands. And like, where did Chuck go? Well, Chuck, had $40,000 of debt and couldn't make his payments anymore. So he had to go home and find a 9 to 5. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, if you want to do 9 to 5. But if your dream's to be a musician and an artist like mine was, having some being savvy, whether it's FPU University or just reading a book, but actually doing the principles of having an emergency fund, putting money aside for like when the unexpected happens, will save your butt and keep you on the road way longer than the majority of your peers.
Yeah, this is true.
And I think the other thing too is when it comes to an artist, but even, just regular folk, people working the 9 to 5 job, saving up for that vacation versus putting it on your credit card.
Yes.
I think that's really bad financial practice to be putting a vacation on your credit card. Like, I know you've worked hard. I know you're tired. I know you need a break. But if you can't afford it and you haven't put the money aside, you're going to be paying for it later on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, who wants you to do that?
Like literally.
You know who wants you to put the vacation on the credit card?
Who?
Visa.
Yeah.
In 2022, I don't have the 2023 numbers yet because the year has just turned, but I've got the 2022 numbers. Visa made $40 billion.
My goodness.
$40 billion. That's one credit card. Now, if you put MasterCard, Amex, Discover, and all the other cards, it's a probably $100 billion, hundreds of billions of dollars industry. And so Visa loves that you use the credit card. They love that they get to charge you whatever it is, whatever you're paying, 20, 22, 29%. Even though we plan to pay it back before the interest, right? They love that. And the thing is, they're not going to come to your door to rescue you when you do get stuck. And so if you can make it a practice to save up for that vacation, it's called delayed gratification. And what we have found is those who have delayed gratification become more successful than those who don't because they're willing to wait and hold on.
Right.
And so if you can save up for that, we do a Find More Money challenge now where we teach people how to find an extra $250 to $500 more per month. And one of the things I tell people, like, if you find an extra $500 a month and you save that for the next 12 months, you got like $6,000. That's a vacation. Mm-hmm. To almost anywhere you want to go. And people are surprised how fast it can happen if they do get focused and intentional with their money.
I figured out a way to make a few extra $100 per month.
How?
Well, in the times that we're in with high interest rates, I just watch the money accumulate.
That's right. Savings?
Yeah.
That's right. 5% savings accounts right now.
5% savings. Like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just twiddling my thumbs watching, get my statement. Oh, there's another few $100. You're welcome. I mean, thank you,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great time.
Thank you, and you're welcome to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we haven't seen interest rates this high. I remember when I first started in 2008, it's kind of when I started to cut my teeth around money and learning it all. The big recession of '08, I was like, what's going on here? What is this? And that's when I started to ask questions and try to find the answers. Back then, we were making 3% on our savings accounts. I remember that. And then, interest rates went down and the savings account went down completely, where we were making pennies now, nothing, pretty much nothing. So this is the first time in my adult lifetime that I've seen it this high. And I'm a millennial, so, all the millennials that are out there, this is probably our first time seeing rates this high and trying to navigate what to do.
I don't know if I should say this, Mike. I had a conversation with my wife a few months ago, and this was when, the economy appeared to be taking a dive. There's talk of recession and everything else. And I said this to my wife. I said, you do realize that every time the economy has had a downturn, as a family, financially, we've done fairly well.
Right on.
And I think,
awesome.
and it's not just like interest rates and everything else. That's part of it. But I think it's sure. Also learning and knowing already how to live within your means. And I think a lot of times, I think a lot of times when times are good, a lot of people just like, oh, let's just spend, let's just, let's enjoy life and everything else. And then times get tough and they don't know how to do that. And if you're already doing it, it shouldn't be a big issue. So I can't, I'm not going to say that, 15 years ago I was rolling in the dough or anything like that, but certainly, we were trying to live within our means. And so when times were tough, and part of that, again, was the fact that interest rates are higher, that helped us.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the discipline to not overspend is huge, right?
Yeah.
And when money was, let's be honest, up until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, money was cheap. You could go borrow off a line of credit for almost 0% or borrow on a mortgage for like 1%. I thought as low as 1%. I had 1.2% mortgage. Like unheard of. I was like, at some point they're going to have to go negative if things don't change. Like they're going to be giving you money to take a mortgage. Obviously that didn't happen. But if you can, that's so great. If you can have the discipline to manage your money, not overspend, do a budget or a cash flow plan, as I call it here, where you know where your money is going every month. Instead of wondering where it went, like you're going to do well long term. You're going to do really good. And times like this where interest rates are high, I have a mentor. His name's Peter Daniels. Way older. He's been around he's in his probably 90s now. But I remember one of the quotes he said to me was, he said, Mike, never let another crisis go to waste. It's in the hard times that people become wealthy because they've got the discipline. They're ready for the opportunity that most people aren't. And that's where most people will cut their teeth and build wealth. And if that's a goal for you, now's the time to do it.
Yeah. I guess creating a budget is probably a big thing to start with.
That would be, most people call it the dirty B word, but that would definitely be something if you can learn how to do the budget. And here's what it is, by the way. Like most people, the way they do budgets, it doesn't work. It's more of a P&L statement, profit and loss statement than it is a budget. And so if you're going to do one well and do it right for your personal finances in your home, this is how you do it. At the top, you write down, what you're going to make that month, or if you make commissions, or if you're in sales, what you think you're going to make that month. And then what you do is you take that money and your goal is to spend it all on paper first. And so you write down, what do I pay for rent, for the mortgage, utilities, food, and you just go down the list. And the goal is at the end is for everything to equal zero. Your income minus your monthly expenses equals zero. Now, if you've got money left over, go back and put it somewhere. Maybe it's extra savings. Maybe you pay off some extra debt with it, or save for that vacation we were talking about earlier, and put in your budget, and then have that bounce down to zero. And then what you do, and this is what most people miss, because what happens is they put it down on paper, then they swipe, end of the month, oh my gosh, we overspent. What you do is whether you want to do this weekly or just at the end of the month or daily if you want to do it, we usually tell people at the beginning, do it more often than not. So a week might be a good opportunity for the new people doing this. Is every week you sit down and you just write down your expenses beside each category.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is as you write down those expenses, you start to see if you're about to overspend. And if you're about to overspend, obviously you got to say, pause, stop, that category we're not spending anymore for the month, we're done. And it allows you to look at it in a different way than just writing it down and then coming back at the end of the month and hoping and praying everything works. And that way doesn't work. But if you do it this way, where you have your income, write down your expenses on paper for the month, and as you spend, write down what you actually spend beside what you thought you were going to spend, that is probably going to help you, A, find more money, but B, it's going to help you get back in control of your finances. And it usually takes a couple months to get it going well. So if it doesn't work month one,
sure.
Don't be discouraged. Because what you're doing is you're learning your habits and behaviors on paper. Is what you're doing essentially. And so it usually takes, we tell our clients, usually 3 to 6 months to really get it dialed in well. And if you'll hold out and if you'll persevere during the 3 to 6 months, at the end of that, this will be easy. It'll be automatic. It'll be a no-brainer. You're going to be in control, confident around your money. You're going to know where everything's going. You're going to know if you're going to be short this month ahead of time. So, if you got to make arrangements or talk to people or whatever, essentially, you're not going to be chasing your tail anymore.
I'll tell you something that the Lord spoke to me years ago. And to be very honest, I'm still working it, and just as clear as day. He said, discipline plus consistency equals payoff. Discipline plus consistency equals payoff.
That's more than just money, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And maintaining that sense of discipline, man. I'll tell you what, it's hard, but it does pay off. If we can exercise discipline in our lives, and we'll see results. Now, and I'm a results-driven person.
Now, speaking of consistency and determination and everything else that you've just said, Ayiesha, let's talk retirement. And I'm not ready to retire yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But and this isn't to gloat or anything else. I could retire if I wanted to.
There you go.
I've got a few years to go, and I'd have to sell my house to do it. But I could do all that, live off the interest if I really wanted to. And I'm not saying that to gloat or anything like that, but I want to get to a point where I'm my own boss. I'm not relying on somebody else for anything. But let's talk now from an artist and a musician standpoint, Mike. That's one thing. It's one thing to save for a vacation. It's one thing to, put money aside into an emergency fund. But now saving for that retirement, are you going to be an artist singing or performing past whatever age,
nope.
Or do you want to kick back and relax a little bit? And I should point out as well, my dentist has got to be in his 70s or something like that. And his comment, he's a Christian, and his comment to me was, it doesn't say anything in the Bible about retiring, so I'm still doing this and I'm having fun.
I love it.
So part of it too is,
thou faithful unto death.
Yeah, if work is fun, if you're having fun doing it, you don't have to stop either. But if you're working to the point where you just want to put your feet up and do nothing for the rest of your life, well, that's fine. But you got to do the work ahead of time to do all that. So can you speak to that a little bit, Mike?
Yeah, retirement. I mean, retirement is a word that he's right. It's not in the Bible. Something that's more recently been a word created in the industrial age. The goal is to get people to move on so they can hire younger people. But the concept of retirement. Here's my view of the concept of retirement. I think you want to get to a point in your life where you can choose what you want to do. If that's continue to working at your job you love doing, you're choosing to do it. That's what a good retirement allows you to do. Is it gives you choices. If you want to go, I know someone that retired from their 9 to 5 to go work in missions, and now they spend the retirement traveling, working in missions. Retirement should be an opportunity to do what you want to do, and in this day and age, I don't want to discourage anybody, but you're going to need roughly, if you want to live well, Okay, and we can all define what well looks like differently. But if you want to live well, you're going to need probably about $1 million, roughly about $1 million, give or take, maybe a little bit less. But you're not retiring on $100,000 anymore.
Right.
Because the goal of your retirement money, all right, this is a concept we teach our clients, is you want your money to be able to produce more. You want your money to get pregnant and produce more money babies. That's called compound interest. Every time your money doubles, every time your money grows and produces more money, that's compound interest. And the faster your money can compound, the more money you have at retirement. And then what the goal in retirement is to take that money and let that money produce an income for you that is free of a 9-to-5 job.
Yes.
That's the goal. Now, that's high level. Obviously, how you get there, that's a whole other conversation. But I'll say this. There isn't one person that's listening to this podcast that can't get there. And that's a bold statement. If you're 25 years old, it takes about $100 to $150 a month. Until you're 65, you'll have roughly about $1.7 million.
Wow.
If you invest it, get an average return of 10 to 12%.
I got my kids to put money towards retirement before they could actually put money towards retirement.
That's right. I'm doing the same with my kids. I got an 8-year-old who does $30, roughly about $15 to $30 a month. She's going to be a multimillionaire at retirement.
Yeah, and you get used to that whole savings standpoint anyways, and so it's not
that
difficult
model,
to do.
Yeah, you put it in place.
Yeah,
you put it into place.
Look at it. Look at it the same way treat it the same way you budget eating out. If you give yourself, $100 or $200 or $300 a month for eating out, you got to do the same for your retirement. And it doesn't have to be that number exactly, but have a line in your cash flow plan or your budget that says retirement fund. And every month you put that into, some sort of savings outside of the banks, something that can give you a better return than 5%. And long term, that money will grow and double and double and double again. And before you know it, you're retiring and you've got a good chunk of change to fall back on.
How can we invest in kingdom and see a monetary return?
Yeah, because you're not taking it with you, right? When you die and leave this earth, that money ain't going with you.
Right.
But as I tell people, you can invest it forward, and you can see it, in heaven. And the way it works, and there's a couple ways. One, just if you make it a practice of just giving and putting that in your budget every month. Some say tithing and they give 10%. That's great. Some do more than that. Some have to do less than that. It doesn't matter. Just start doing something. And, we give to our local church that's really involved in the city and helping people that are down and out, that are, and that's one way to invest into the kingdom. Another way, like I said, my buddy Russ, who retired years ago, and he went into full-time missions because he had, again, he invested and grew wealth in a way where when he retired, he had something to live on. So he now he volunteers his time into, and that's what he does all year.
Awesome.
So that's another way to do it.
You talked about kids and setting money aside, having them set money aside regularly. Now, can you talk to us a little bit about generational wealth?
I love generational wealth. I've got an investment club called the Generation Wealth Investment Club. And it's where we teach people how to invest and grow wealth. Listen, most Christians don't get this concept. Most Jewish people do get the concept. It's in the Old Testament. It's been passed down. Great book on this if you want to dive into details. It's called Thou Shalt Prosper by Daniel Lapin. He dives into this way deeper than I'm about to dive into it.
Thou shalt prosper. I'm writing it down.
Okay, by Daniel Lapin. Daniel Lapin's a Jewish rabbi, speaks to a lot of Christians, but what I love about what he brings to the table is he even says this: Christians don't understand Jewish culture and the Old Testament, and so he breaks it down for us. One of the concepts he breaks down is generational wealth. And says, it takes one generation to build wealth for the rest of the generations going forward. The problem is Christians aren't teaching it, and they haven't been taught it either, right? So it's a twofold thing. But generational wealth. Listen, I'll just give you some high level numbers. Let's just say you get to retirement and you retire a millionaire. Let's just say you hit that $1 million mark. Okay. If you're 25, it takes roughly about $125 a month. If you're 30, I think you're about $350 a month to do it. If you're in your 40s, it's about $1,000 a month to get there. Okay. And that's averaging 10 to 12%, which the stock market has done for the last 30 years. Okay. So, it's not hard to get there. It just takes time and patience. So let's just say you get to $1 million and you're 65, you're retired, you're like, okay, I'm going to, go do what I want to do, whatever. Your goal in your lifetime is not to spend that $1 million. Your goal in your lifetime is to have that $1 million produce an income for you every single day for the rest of your life. And that $1 million invested at roughly, let's call it 8% at that point. Maybe you got dividends paying you 8%. Will produce for you roughly about $80,000 to $90,000 a year passive income. That's, you want to talk about passive income. That's the best passive income I know out there. Money you get without having to do anything, and the stock market can do that for you. And let's just say 20 years later, you pass away. The average person now is living to about 85. You pass away, and you've got roughly that $1 million left that you leave to the next generation. Well, the next generation now invests that money at 10 to 12%. By the time they hit retirement, obviously this depends on how old they are when you pass away. By the time they hit retirement, that money's probably doubled, because at 12%, your money doubles every 7 years. So $5 million.
And 7 years goes by fast.
7 years can go by fast. Yeah. Just ask anyone who's a little bit older. We can tell you 7 years will fly by fast. That roughly $1 million or so has now doubled. Now you're living off $2 million, and you let the $2 million produce for you an income. You pass away. Now you pass that down to your kids and grandkids, and you let that $2 million run for another 7 years. You've now got $4 million. And you do it again and again and again and again. And obviously part of this conversation is teaching your family how to handle that money, because if they don't know how to handle it can ruin them. So you gotta teach them. Obviously, that's part of the conversation. It's not just all about money. It's about teaching them how it works and the discipline behind it, and all that. But that's how you start to build you want to talk about Rockefeller wealth? That's how they did it. Pass it down from generation to generation to generation. And each generation understood how to handle it, how to manage it, and that's how you start to build generational wealth. And here's the best part for the king. You want to talk about for the kingdom? You now take that money, and again, it's producing for you 10 to 12%. You can now take a good portion of that money and start to give that away. To missionaries that need your help, to organizations that are going out and saving souls. You can start to fund them in a big way. Other than giving $20 every week in the offering plate, you can now say, hey, I'll write you a check for $100,000 because you're doing the work. And that's investing into the kingdom.
You better know it.
I really believe every Christian, in my opinion, this is my opinion, so take it how you will, but I really believe every Christian should have a goal to build generational wealth. So their kids never have to suffer, or I shouldn't say suffer, that's the wrong word, never have to struggle around money. And B, so every generation can become more and more generous, change the world for Jesus, save lives for Jesus, and influence this world in a way that most Christians can't do. I use the word most, but a lot of Christians won't be able to do, because we're living paycheck to paycheck trying to figure out how to balance the budget. So it's multiple steps to get there, and it takes time to get there. But if you'll focus and really commit to it, it takes one generation to change everything. And I'll say this, and I don't want to. This isn't like getting conspiracy and all that stuff here, but a bunch of years ago, the Canadian government went to churches. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Went to churches and said, if you don't change, I forget what they had to change, but they wanted the churches to be inclusive of certain things that you're not going to find most churches being inclusive of. And they said, if you don't change this, we're not going to give you funding for, a lot of churches will do summer programs and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was for the student volunteer program where students that they would get grants from the government to support students working over the summer, but they had to change their philosophy or their I don't know what you call it, their bylaws, I guess, in a sense, of the church
I see.
to accommodate that just so they could get the student funding.
The funding.
And so I watched some churches shut down the program.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, we're not doing that. And they didn't have the money to do it.
Right.
I watched other churches who had a lot of wealth in them and a lot of money savviness. Churches say, that's fine. We're not going to accept that. We'll just run our own program. And we've got enough members tithing and giving where they continue to do that. All that to say, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but you want to be in a position. I can see the government one day saying, well, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not entitled to CPP anymore. If you live in the U.S., that's old age security for Canada. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it ever does, I want to be able to say, well, that's fine. I've got $1 million nest egg. We'll continue to give out of that and live off of that by CPP. And in fact, as a business owner, we've stopped paying into it. That's one of the things we teach a lot of businesses is to stop paying into it and to start to invest that money into yourself. The average person pays roughly about $500 into CPP. Their employer pays $500 into CPP for that usually. Almost 10% of your income is going into CPP. Yet when you get to old age, if you see what you're actually given, it's sad how much they
pennies.
give you. But it's pennies.
Not what you put into it. That's for sure.
Not what you put into
pennies.
it. And there's a reason why they got to, what are we, 35 million Canadians or 40 million Canadians now? Like they've got to spread it out.
Yeah, and it's got to be the stability to the program and all that other stuff you hear about.
That.
Yeah.
Good
but when I
gracious.
sit down with business owners, I say, listen, if you start, I've stopped paying into CPP, just the way I've set up my business, I have the option to not pay into it anymore. I say, if you stop paying into it, and if you'll take that same money, that $500 to $1,000 a month that you had to pay into CPP, and you invest that alone will produce enough wealth for you that when you hit retirement, you won't have to worry about money. You've got your own quote unquote CPP plan. Anyways, all that to say here, there's ways, like I said, every Canadian listening to this, every American listening to this, there's no reason why you can't become wealthy if you'll follow the steps. And the goal is to just really be in control so that when God calls you to do something, missions or to work somewhere or to be a part of this, you're free. You're free to do it.
Yep, that's it.
That's the point. That's the goal.
Mike, want to thank you for your time and thank you for hanging with us.
It's been so good, brother.
Yeah, a lot of good nuggets for people to take along, and hopefully it causes people to look at their own future and what's going on in their life financially to make sure that they're set for the future, whether it be the emergency fund, looking at retirement, looking at blessing others. I guess if people want to learn more about you, they can go to moneycoachmike.com. And thanks for your time today.
Hey guys, thanks so much. Great to be here.
I'll tell you what, that was a great conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I almost want to go and I'm going to have to listen to it again. But right now we're going to check out some artist advice from Dustin from Sanctus Real.
Have a solid foundation. Don't make it about music, because in this business, it's inevitable that somebody's going to like your music and somebody's not going to like your music. And it's the most up and down, even for bands that have made it, right? Like, it's just up and down. And every level you get to just becomes a new normal. And that's the thing. People think, hey, I signed a deal. It's going to be great. Now I'm going to be famous. That's not how it works. And it's the most up and down thing. And I think the young artists that I mentor and worked with, the hardest thing they deal with is that they've made music their center. They've made that their foundation. That's not, you have to have a foundation that even if music was taken away from you, you'd be okay. You have to have a solid base or this business will chew you up and spit you out. If you're in Christian music and you're a believer, make sure you have a center and a foundation or there's no point in doing this thing. Just go to secular music. It'll be a lot easier.
The key words for me in what he said there was, even if music was taken away from you.
Yes.
You having a solid foundation is important, but what does that really mean? And what it really meant to me was when he said, if music were taken away from you. So whatever your passion is, whatever your love is, if that was taken away from you, what have you got left?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the solid foundation and firm foundation is being in relationship with Jesus, because like he said, music can be taken away in a day.
Yeah.
A career can be taken away at any point in time. And if you're not in relationship with Jesus, then what's it all for anyway?
That's right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, thank you to Dustin from Sanctus Real, and thank you to Mike Crofts for hanging with us today. Really enjoyed that conversation. If you missed any part of that conversation, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Until next week, James Curtis along with Ayiesha Woods on Between the Grooves.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Faith Strong Today's Between the Grooves podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your friends, rating our podcast, or giving us some love on your socials to your amazing friends and followers will only help us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you and share your feedback in an upcoming episode. Send your video or written message to Ayiesha and James on Facebook or X at Between Grooves and on Instagram at Between Grooves Pod. Or email us anytime, hello@faithstrongtoday.com.